Defense Secretary Jim Mattis revealing today the White House is giving him additional authority to use the military at the border to protect customs and border personnel with lethal force if necessary. Now, it could mean using the troops to temporarily detain migrants for, quote, minutes, not hours, we're told. Mattis's words there, in the event of violence against Border Patrol agents. But Mattis also telling reporters tonight that the lethal force authorization is not the same as a lethal force request, which has to come from the Department of Homeland Security. Another key point, he says, the soldiers deployed to the border are unarmed.
There has been no call for any lethal force from DHS. So right away, I can say, going back to your earlier point, we don't have guns in their hands right now other than a couple of NCOs.
All right, the number of Americans citing immigration as a problem, the biggest problem in the U.S., is rising sharply. This is all according to a recent Gallup poll. They keep a running list and a running track of what people say are the top issues. Mentions of immigration as the nation's top problem are up 8 percentage points in just 1 month. Let's talk about it with tonight's Power Panel. Democratic strategist and partner at Forward Solutions Strategy, Isaac Wright, Fox News contributor, former acting ICE director Tom Homan, and the opinion editor of the Deseret News, former chief of staff to Senator Mike Lee, Boyd Matheson. Good to have you.
Good to be here.
All right, and Boyd, is it Deseret? I always think I'm going to get that wrong.
Deseret.
Deseret, okay,
Deseret
it's confirmed by the official who would know. Okay,
That's
so
right.
I want to start with this. From this order that was signed today by White House Chief of Staff General John Kelly, he says this: credible evidence and intelligence indicate that migrant caravans originating from Central America and moving toward the southern border of the United States may prompt incidents of violence and disorder that could threaten U.S. Customs and Border Protection and other U.S. government personnel. Tom, we're being told that statements like that are hyperbolic, and they're really overplaying the real threat at the border.
Well, look, those statements are 100% accurate. I can guarantee you that. And I was director of ICE, and I know the law enforcement techniques they're using. I will not share them here on open air, but I can tell you that we know there's over 500 criminals in that one population. We know there's a lot of people that have been deported once before, and they're going to re-enter. If they re-enter illegally, that's a felony. So, look, there's a lot of intelligence. The President, the Secretary of Homeland Security have access to the most sophisticated intelligence in the world. And I know what law enforcement techniques they're using. You can count, be sure that that data is correct, what's being reported.
Okay, so I want to also point to a Monmouth poll asking about the seriousness of the illegal immigration problem. In this new numbers just out in November, the numbers are up. 70% of people in America that they talk to consider it a somewhat serious or very serious problem. Isaac.
I hope Republicans keep reading those polls. Clearly, they were the polls they were reading going into Election Day. Every poll I saw said Americans' #1 concern was health care leading up to the election and since then. And given the election results and 40 U.S. House seats picked up for Democrats, if Republicans want to keep following those polls, I encourage them to do it.
Did you like what happened in the Senate?
I think in the Senate map, I think we did as well as we could have expected or better given the map of what Senate seats were up this year.
Okay, so let's
pick up in the U.S. House, 7 seats flipped in the gubernatorial offices, and 300 to 700 seats, I think I've read, picked up in legislatures across the country.
Much better for a sitting incumbent president in their first midterm than we have seen for others in the past. But that's another debate. So let's get back to immigration. Another part of this order signed by General Kelly says this: deployed military personnel may perform activities that are reasonably necessary to ensure the protection and safety of federal personnel, including a show or use of force, including lethal force where necessary, crowd control, temporary detention, and cursory search. But Boyd, we are told by the Defense Secretary himself, these guys are not armed.
Yeah, I think we have to be very careful, Shannon, in terms of looking at how this plays in the political rhetoric space as opposed to the reality of what's happening at the border. The American citizens are concerned for sure, but the thing that we have to remember is that I'm convinced we could solve 94% of the immigration issue in an afternoon on the floor of the House and the Senate. And we should call on Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell on the first day they're in session. They could get this done before the sun goes down.
Why aren't they?
Because it's political, and people use it to raise hundreds of millions of dollars every single year. both political parties and campaigns and outside groups raise the money. They use it as a wedge issue to win campaigns. You've just talked about that. But we have to get back to, look, everyone agrees we need border security. We need a better entry-exit system. We need to redo the visa process. Everybody agrees on all of those things. But it's the politics that's getting in the way. And that's what we have to unmask for the American people. We've got to expect more from both parties. This is not left or right. This is the people in power making sure they stay in power on both sides of the aisle.
But what about the average Americans, Boyd? I mean, about people who are impacted by this on a daily basis in their real lives. They elect these people and send them here.
Yeah, and that's one of the real challenges, because you're right, Shannon. This is a we the people problem. While Congress has an approval rating of only 11%, 11%, that's lower than the influenza virus. We re-elected 90% of incumbents back into office. So citizens have to say, yes, this is impacting my life and my world, and we need to do things just a little bit different.
Okay.
We did have a sweeping change in the U.S. House, though, and given the fact Republicans have controlled the White House and both chambers of Congress for 2 years and completely failed at addressing this issue, hopefully there is hope to do so now.
Just as the Democrats did under President Obama, they had 2 years to get it done, too, where they controlled both houses and the president was in charge. So Democrats and Republicans alike are not into solving this problem in a serious way.
And if I could finish what I was going to say, and as we know, there are 750,000 cases right now in backlog of asylum seekers. There are somewhere estimates between 5,000 and 10,000 people in this caravan seeking asylum in the United States from persecution overseas. According to every credible report, it's mostly poor people. It's mostly folks fleeing from bad situations, trying to seek the American dream.
Okay.
We owe it, if we're going to be a global leader, to do the right thing and process those cases. And if people are criminals, send them home. But if they're here legitimately as asylum seekers, we should do that officially and get them here. To do that, we got to fix the system that has 750,000 backlog in cases right now.
I mean, Tom, that has been a problem that has been building for generations. I mean, it is something that's not going to go away. You saw it firsthand. But is there a difference between people coming here for a better economic opportunity, legally or illegally, and those who are coming simply because the conditions in their country are truly violent and they actually need asylum? I mean, we know the fraction of cases that are actually approved after asylum hearings are really low, and a lot of times those people are already in the country and they're not coming back.
Look, bottom line is your last speaker is just wrong. I mean, the data speaks for itself. Yeah, a lot of them are fleeing poverty. I get it, and I certainly feel bad for plight of these people. But 89 to 90%, 89 to 90% of Central Americans claim asylum lose their case in front of a judge. That is just a stone cold fact. Now, if they can stand in line with millions of other people that stand in line for 10 to 12 years to come to this country. But asylum has, the law is clear on asylum. You have to be escaping fear and persecution for your political views, your race, or religion. Fleeing poverty, unfortunately, doesn't qualify for asylum. And I agree. And the speaker was talked about Congress. I agree with him 100%. What I've been saying for a year and a half. The reason the caravan's on the border is because Congress had failed American people. They have not closed the loopholes that raise the asylum bar, give ICE a number of beds so they're not catching release. People think they're going to get released when they get across the border. I mean, they could have fixed a lot of this stuff. A Florida settlement agreement, let's detain families more than 20 days. Congress has failed American people, and that's why the caravan's here. And as far as the Democrats, when they start talking about abolishing ICE, let's support sanctuary cities. That entices people to come to this country. So, you know, there's a lot of blame to go around. But I tell you what, we have a president that's taking this seriously. I've worked for 6 of them. This president's taking the border security. He made a promise to protect our border and protect the sovereignty of this country, and that's exactly what he's doing, and I applaud him for it.
Well, it upsets a lot of people. He upsets a lot of people. I mean, when presidents or anybody touch this, it's almost a third rail situation. When you actually talk about the border, although people will say they want secure borders, when you talk about specific things like cracking down, turning back families, building walls, that's where the rubber meets the road, and a lot of politicians, as we've discussed across the political spectrum, can't get this done because it becomes such a contentious issue. We didn't solve it tonight, but I do hope all of you have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and maybe you can discuss or not around the Thanksgiving table tomorrow. Isaac, Tom, and Boyd.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you
Shannon.
too. Thanks.
Happy Thanksgiving.